Rhode Island, America's smallest state, only 37 miles wide and 48 miles long. But while it may lack the wide open spaces of some of America's larger states, Rhode Island is home to more than 20% of America's national historic landmarks. From the breakers and the other fabulous mansions of the Gilded Age, to Slater's Mill, which ushered in America's Industrial Revolution. 60% of Rhode Island is covered in woodland and parks to protect the natural environment. A journey through Rhode Island's bays and coves reveals nearly 400 miles of pristine tidal shoreline with an incredible array of lighthouses and even more incredible stories of rum runners and pirates off of Newport's rocky shores. All of this glimmering water has enticed explorers and Puritans, those fleeing persecution and those seeking to start a revolution. Rhode Island's history is rich with the stories of American progress and American excess. It's called the Ocean State, and to see it from the air, it's easy to understand why. Great Swamp, located in southern Rhode Island, was home to the first residents of Rhode Island, the Narragansett Indians. The name Narragansett means people of the small, narrow point. And archaeological evidence suggests that the Narragansett have lived on this land for more than 30,000 years. The first European to set foot in what would become the state of Rhode Island was Giovanni da Verrazzano in 1524. He actually arrived here on Block Island, a small island off the coast of the mainland. Verrazzano's legacy lives on in Narragansett Bay in the form of this bridge, which is named after him. Rhode Island has always had a reputation as a fiercely independent state. And nowhere is it more evident than here in Providence. Even its state capital, modeled after the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C., has a statue on top called simply Independent Man. Providence was founded by Roger Williams, who came to the Massachusetts Bay Colony to escape the religious intolerance of England. In 1636, he arrived in Rhode Island, where he purchased land from the Narragansett Indians. He called the new settlement Providence, in thanks to God. Williams created the first Baptist church in America. One of the church's meeting houses, dating back to 1775, still stands today, and the church is currently being renovated. Its 185-foot steeple was built on the ground by sailboat makers in just 3 days. Williams established a policy of religious and political freedom in his new settlement, and soon after, colonists with similar beliefs began to arrive in Rhode Island. Rivers shaped the life of Providence. The colonial waterfront was the site of a thriving shipping economy for the so-called triangle trades of slaves, rum, and molasses, as well as the China trade. Soon, Providence and Newport were among the busiest ports in the New World. Since the prosperous days of the colonial era, Providence has seen its fortunes rise and fall more than once. In the late mid-20th century, Providence, home of religious freedom in America, became known more for its corruption and rundown factories than its historical significance. But in the 1980s, that all changed. Just down the hill from the state capitol building, what was once an eyesore became the center of a renaissance. Providence's waterfront is not the only part of the city that has been revitalized. Its historic corridors have also been restored to their Revolutionary era glory. But that almost didn't happen. In the 1950s, the city of Providence planned to raise and redevelop part of historic Benefit Street, which runs through this area. The Providence Preservation Society, established to protest the raising, offered up a plan to preserve the whole street. Today, Benefit Street is home to one of the largest concentrations of historic architecture in the nation. A few blocks to the east of Benefit Street sits one of America's oldest and most prestigious universities. Brown University opened its doors to students in 1765 and was the only school that welcomed students of all religious persuasions. The university began as Rhode Island College, but was renamed in 1804 after a man named Nicholas Brown gave what at the time was a large financial gift, $5,000. In today's money, the equivalent of about $76,000. Across the street from the main quadrangle at Brown sits the John Hay Library. Hay, a Brown alumnus, served as Abraham Lincoln's private secretary during the Civil War and later became Secretary of State. The library houses a collection of rare books, including 3 that feature an unusual binding: human skin. Although it sounds grisly, in the late 1800s, it wasn't unusual to bind books with human skin from cadavers. This 46-mile-long river has long been called the hardest-working river in America. The Blackstone River runs from inland Massachusetts to the north end of Narragansett Bay. This is a National Heritage Corridor, and it's here that America's Industrial Revolution began. Slater's Mill stands at the falls at the Blackstone River. British immigrant Samuel Slater came to America with a plan to take English mill plans and build them in America. With his knowledge and capital provided by Moses Brown from Providence, Slater built the first successful U.S. textile mill. The Industrial Revolution had begun. The mills on the site are still powered by the Blackstone River. While celebrated for bringing the Industrial Revolution to America, the mill was also infamous. Slater employed many children, ages 7 to 13. Some of Lewis Hines' famous child labor photographs were taken at Slater Mill. Hines' photographs, showing harsh conditions for child laborers, resulted in new laws being created to protect children. Today, some believe that the centuries-old mill is haunted by some of the children who worked here. Visitors often talk about feeling a presence, especially by the old machine shop. This 10-foot wide and 50-foot deep abyss is another Rhode Island landmark known for its legends. It's said that Purgatory Chasm was created by the powerful swing of the Devil's Axe. It's more likely that Purgatory Chasm was created by the force of the sea wearing away the rock. It's carved nearly 100 feet into the shore from the cliff. Some people have unwisely tried to jump the chasm, instead falling between the giant slabs of rock. Like the rivers that shaped the early life of Providence and Pawtucket, Rhode Island's Narragansett Bay is the lifeblood of the towns that surround it. In the East Bay is Bristol, an unpretentious coastal town established in 1680. The layout of the city is based on a grid plan with a large common at its center, the only one of its kind in Rhode Island. Bristol's deep water harbor helped it to become a thriving commercial port before the American Revolution. And by 1800, it was the fourth busiest port in the country. Fortunes were made from maritime trading, whaling, and shipbuilding. Harrisoff Boatyard was famous for the yachts it built here in the harbor. Several were winners of the World Cup. The large homes built for local merchants and shipbuilders make up the heart of Old Bristol. Today, Bristol Harbor offers ferries to several islands in the bay, including this one, which takes visitors to Prudence Island. Bristol has become a popular destination for summer homes. So has its neighbor to the south, Jamestown. Jamestown still retains much of its agricultural feel, with extensive open farm fields and even a still functional windmill. The Jamestown Windmill powered a grain mill for more than 100 years. In 1912, it was given to the Jamestown Historical Society that has maintained and restored the mill. In the late 19th century, wealthy industrialist Joseph Wharton and other Philadelphia Quakers built summer homes in Jamestown. Wharton's house, Marbella, overlooks Narragansett Bay, where it meets the ocean. This area is filled with stories of pirates and privateers. Local legend holds that Captain Kidd's treasure was hidden here when he was in town visiting his friend, privateer Captain Thomas Paine. To this day, people search the caves at what is now Fort Wetherill State Park, hoping to find Kidd's bounty. But so far, no one has scored. This site is also known for its spectacular views and is a popular place for watching yacht races. Until 1940, Jamestown was an island with no connection to the mainland of Newport. Then, the Jamestown Verrazano Bridge was built. The Pell Bridge opened to traffic in 1969, connecting Jamestown to Newport. Originally called the Newport Bridge, in 1992 it was renamed for U.S. Senator Claiborne Pell. But most residents still refer to it as the Newport Bridge. It is the largest suspension bridge in New England. Jamestown isn't the only Rhode Island town with pirate stories. In this tavern, a notorious pirate was also a popular business owner. The White Horse Tavern was built in 1673. It was the meeting place for the Rhode Island Colony's General Assembly, Criminal Court, and City Council, and it was owned by a pirate named William Mays. It's one of the oldest taverns in the United States, and you can still have a drink here today. Possibly with a ghost, since many say the White Horse Tavern is haunted. Another eating establishment with almost cult status is Flo's Clam Shack. There's nothing pretentious or expensive about this clam shack, which started serving traditional Rhode Island shore fare in 1936. From clam cakes to clam chowder and stuffed clams, Flo's wins award after award for its food. Its luck hasn't been as good with buildings. Since it opened, Flo's buildings have been completely ruined 4 times by hurricanes. Most recently, Hurricane Bob washed it away in 1991. So far, the newest building has survived nature's wrath. There was another building in Newport that has survived much longer. The old stone mill is shrouded in mystery. There are many theories about how this tower came to be. Some believe it was built by Norsemen before Columbus ever arrived in the New World. Another says that the governor of Newport commissioned the tower as a windmill during colonial times. Its 24-foot-high walls are made of fieldstone, and its interior is open to the sky. New theories about the tower's origins fill websites and articles. But the mystery will continue on because no one knows for sure who built the old stone mill. The first summer visitors to arrive in Newport were wealthy merchants from South Carolina and Georgia who traveled north to escape the summer heat in the south. With its sheltered harbor, beautiful beaches, and awe-inspiring architecture, Newport, Rhode Island is a shining gem on New England's Atlantic coast. These so-called summer cottages are another remnant from the Industrial Revolution. They were built from the vast fortunes earned by what some called robber barons and others called savvy businessmen. On the islands across Newport Harbor, a new American aristocracy had been born. One of the world's most famous weddings took place here in September of 1953. More than 750 guests filled St. Mary's Church to watch as Senator John F. Kennedy and Jacqueline Bouvier exchanged wedding vows. Afterward, 1,200 guests attended the reception at Hammersmith Farm, a 300-acre oceanfront estate overlooking Narragansett Bay, where Jackie and her family spent many summers. The young couple continued to summer in Newport, and the city was often called Kennedy's Summer White House. Every Saturday in the summer, the Newport International Polo Club holds matches here at the historic 100-acre Glen Farm. Newport calls itself the International Polo Capital of the world. Matches have taken place here for more than 100 years. These ponies at Glen Farm are taking a rest as they gear up for another Saturday match before a crowd of well-heeled onlookers. There's a certain social and economic exclusivity associated with polo and with Newport itself. But today's version pales in comparison to the Gilded Age. There are few places in the world where the pastime is yacht watching. But there were few places like Newport, Rhode Island in the Gilded Age. It was the coastal resort of choice for American business magnates like the Vanderbilts and the Astors. The term Gilded Age was coined by Mark Twain and referred to the extravagant displays of wealth and excess of America's super rich. Others call it conspicuous consumption. In Newport, renowned architects were designing enormous homes that mimicked the castles and palaces of Europe, each family seeking to one-up their neighbors. The Breakers is probably the most spectacular of Newport's summer cottages. This 70-room Victorian mansion, built by tycoon Cornelius Vanderbilt, is a symbol of the Vanderbilt family's social and financial preeminence at the turn of the century. Vanderbilt built his wealth in the railroad and shipping industries. Today, many of the homes are preserved. Some are open for tours. Others are hotels, like Castle Hill. This was one of the first major summer houses built along Newport's Ocean Drive. Its wide porches and sweeping views of the bay make it a popular destination. Beacon Rock, near Ocean Drive, overlooks Newport Harbor. Built for the brother of J.P. Morgan, eventually the home was owned by the sculptor Felix de Weldon, who was famous for sculpting the Iwo Jima Memorial in Washington, D.C. This magnificent home is right near Fort Adams State Park. Fort Adams is the largest coastal fortification in the United States. Construction of the fort began in 1824 and continued until the middle of the 19th century. British attacks on Washington during the War of 1812 inspired the federal government to increase security on the coastline. The fort has a line of vaulted bomb-proof chambers along its 5 feet thick perimeter walls. The commanding officer's house to the south of the fort was used in the late 50s as a vacation spot for President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Today, Fort Adams is well known as the home of the Newport Jazz Festival. It's brought jazz greats and their fans to Newport every August for more than 50 years. Marble House, an exquisitely detailed home, is owned and maintained by the Newport Preservation Society, but it began as the property of another Vanderbilt. In 1888, William Vanderbilt, Cornelius's brother, gave his wife Alva the money to build Marble House as a 39th birthday gift. She oversaw its design and construction over 4 years. Vanderbilt loved European architecture so much that she brought in more than 300 different artisans from Italy to complete her estate. Rough Point was one of 5 homes owned by heiress Doris Duke. Duke was only 13 years old when she inherited her family's $80 million fortune. These camels are here in honor of the two real camels that Mrs. Duke, an animal lover, kept on her property while she lived here. Doris Duke died in 1993. Most of her estate went to charity and to her butler. Rough Point is now owned by the Newport Restoration Foundation and open for tours. Through the foundation, Duke also preserved hundreds of other houses in Newport, making it home to one of the most significant concentrations of 18th century architecture in the country. Adjacent to Duke's estate and backing up to many other Bellevue Avenue mansions is Cliff Walk, a 3.5-mile path through the majestic beauty of Newport's rocky shoreline. Originally used as a hunting path by the Narragansett tribe, today it's Newport's most popular tourist attraction. Over the last 150 years, the public and some estate owners have often clashed over access rights, both along the shore and to the shore. Willing to do just about anything to keep the common people away from their palaces, owners have built walls and fences, planted bushes and trees to block access, and posted dogs and even bulls to scare people away. But the path is a public right-of-way open to everyone. While the wealthy weren't able to keep the riffraff off of Cliff Walk, they were more successful at Bailey's Beach. This beach is reserved for people of a certain pedigree, and taking a swim here is by invitation only. Just having money isn't enough in Newport. One must have long lines of established social background. This mansion was home to the undisputed queen of American society. Caroline Astor insisted that her friends and family call her the Mrs. Astor. Her home here, called Beechwood, was built in 1853. When her husband, William Astor, bought the estate in 1881, it became the social center of New York society. William was the grandson of John Jacob Astor, the German immigrant who made himself the richest man in America through fur trading and real estate. As recently as 1999, John Jacob Astor was listed as the 4th wealthiest American ever. Bill Gates was 5th. The family presided over countless social occasions, including their famous summer ball. Mrs. Astor retired from social life in 1906 and died 2 years later. Astor's son, John Jacob IV, divorced his first wife and married a much younger woman in a ceremony at Beechwood. To escape the scandal, the couple fled to Europe after the wedding. They booked their passage home on the RMS Titanic. Astor's young pregnant wife survived, but he did not. And Astor wasn't the only Newport resident on the ship that fateful day. Miramar, the summer home for George Widener and his wife Eleanor, was under construction in 1912 when the Widener family sailed from England on the maiden voyage of the Titanic. Mrs. Widener survived, but both her husband and son Harry perished. Miramar, Spanish for "Behold the Sea," stayed in the Widener family. In 2006, the mansion sold for just over $17 million, the most ever paid for a property on the island. The least paid might have been for this mansion, set on a rock in Narragansett Bay. It's rumored that J.S. Lovering Wharton built his home on a rock so no one could bother him. Friends and neighbors were skeptical that the house could exist here or that the owner would stay in it. But Wharton spent every summer here until he died in 1938. His wife remained here until her death in 1941. For the next 20 years, the house stood empty, when architect Henry Wood bought the home in 1961 for $3,600. He's owned it ever since. While the corporate giants of the industrial age have long since left Newport, the technology titans of the 20th century have arrived here along with hedge fund managers. Not as conspicuously, though, unless you head to Newport Harbor. Considered to be America's yacht racing mecca, the playthings of today's rich and famous are on display at the marinas that line Newport Harbor along America's Cup Avenue and Thames Street. From Bowen and Bannister's wharves to the very exclusive Newport shipyard, where they are said to not just have yachts, but mega yachts. Newport is considered the sailing capital of the world. The America's Cup, the most prestigious regatta and match race in the sport of sailing, were held here until 1983. But Newport still hosts both national and international regattas here. The abundant supply of water isn't only a source of pleasure for Rhode Islanders, it's also an important part of the economy here. The United States Navy saw the strategic importance of this area and created an experimental torpedo station on Goat Island, seen here just off the mainland. 80% of the submarine torpedoes manufactured for World War I and World War II were made here. A thriving fishing industry developed here in the 19th century and continues today. Galilee is a working fishing village in Narragansett. The ocean waters off the coast are exposed to warm water eddies that break off from the Gulf Stream, bringing with them whales, sharks, tuna, and marlin. Sport fishing is very popular here. But more than just fish can be found under these beautiful blue waters. Not surprisingly, Rhode Island's rocky shores have more shipwrecks per square mile than any other state. Lying deep beneath these pristine waters are more than 2,000 wrecks, including colonial trading ships, ships of war, and luxury passenger vessels from the 19th century. And it seems that lighthouses alone aren't enough to prevent these disasters. In 2006, researchers discovered the remains of 4 ships sunk by the British during the American Revolution in Newport Harbor. Scholars believe that one of the ships was the Lord Sandwich, originally named the Endeavour, which would have dwarfed these smaller vessels with ease. Captain James Cook sailed the Endeavour on his famous voyages across the Pacific Ocean to New Zealand and the eastern coast of Australia. A series of lighthouses have been built on Narragansett Bay to keep sea travelers safe. One of the first was on Point Judith at the bay's entrance. At one time, this point saw more ship traffic than New York Harbor. On one infamous night in 1896, 5 vessels ran aground here during a storm. Now, the lighthouse is automated, and it shares the property with the U.S. Coast Guard station. Now Rhode Island has 21 lighthouses. 13 of them are active, and the others are privately held. Like Nyack Point, built in 1828 to mark the narrow channel between Nyack Point and the reef off Conimicut Point. This lighthouse was poorly built and needed repairs almost immediately. It was auctioned off in 1890 to private owners. Since that time, the lighthouse has been greatly expanded and is used as a private residence. The Nyack Point Lighthouse is listed in the National Register of Historic Places and in 2001 sold for nearly $1.3 million. Built into the cliff face, Castle Hill Lighthouse was lit in 1890 after years of negotiation with the property's owner. Finally, the owner relented and sold the land to the government for $1. Although not open to the public, the lighthouse is accessible to guests of the nearby Castle Hill Inn and Resort. The lighthouse has a red light that flashes about every 8 seconds at night. Imagine sailing in complete darkness, the only sight a small red light flashing every 8 seconds. It could be yards or miles away. Conanicut Lighthouse sits on the northern tip of Conanicut Island. It was activated in 1886. The tower is attached to the wood-framed keeper's house. By the 1930s, there was no longer enough ship traffic to justify having a manned lighthouse here. It was deactivated, and the buildings and property were sold at auction for $2,874. Today, the station is a private residence. Only once in American history has a lighthouse been named after its keeper, and this is where it stood. In 1854, Hosea Lewis was named innkeeper of the Lime Rock Lighthouse. Soon, he suffered a stroke, and his duties fell to his wife and their oldest daughter, Ida. Ida handled most of the work here, and when her mother also died, Ida became the lightkeeper. She also became known as the bravest woman in America, enduring the ice-cold water to rescue those stranded on the rocks or drowning. She is credited with saving at least 18 people during her time here. The Rhode Island State Legislature changed the name of the lighthouse from Lime Rock to the Ida Lewis Lighthouse. Today, it's the site of the Ida Lewis Yacht Club. The Rose Island Lighthouse sits on a small island that was used for military purposes from the Revolutionary War through World War II. The island is open to the public, except for one part of the summer, when it becomes a sanctuary for nesting birds, mostly gulls. When the last ferry leaves, the island is off limits, except for a very few people. When the lighthouse became run down due to decay and neglect, the Rose Island Lighthouse Foundation came to its rescue. The foundation came up with a fundraising plan, the Lighthouse Keeper of the Week. For a small price, guests can serve as honorary keepers. The job is involved. The honorary keeps must do everything from dusting the windowsills to keeping the light burning through the night. It may sound like an odd vacation, but it's wildly successful and usually fully booked 2 years in advance. One of the most remote lighthouses in Rhode Island is on the northern end of a small island only accessible by air or water. Block Island. A stark contrast to the opulent playgrounds of Newport, Block Island residents prefer just to be left alone. Thousands of years ago, a glacier left the rolling hills that were to become known as Block Island. Dutch explorer Adrian Block arrived here in 1614 and gave the island its name. Boat wrecks happened often here, given the island's position and the rocky shoals that surround it. A life-saving station was put in, as well as lighthouses on the northern and southern ends of the island. Since Block Island has no natural harbors, in 1870, breakwaters were created to form Old Harbor and give steamers and ferries safe entry to the island. Today, ferries shuttle visitors to the Old Harbor from the mainland. In 1895, another channel was dug to create New Harbor on the west side of the island. It connects the Great Salt Pond to the Atlantic Ocean. Archaeologists believe that when humans first began to settle in the Northeast, they came here and created a settlement around Great Salt Pond. These people were the ancestors of the Menecean Indians. Today, pleasure boaters come from all over to enjoy the pond's sheltered waters. On a summer day, as many as 2,000 boats can fill the pond, and several marinas line the harbor to welcome their visitors. As in many natural places, there's an ongoing debate on how to preserve the island's beauty while also benefiting from tourism. Conservationists see the boats as a threat to the pond's fragile ecosystem, which is part of a national wildlife refuge. Although Block Island is only 12 miles off Rhode Island's coast, it's a world of its own. The Nature Conservancy included the tiny island on a list of 12 sites it called the last great places in the Western Hemisphere. Home to restored Victorian hotels, beautiful beaches, and a fragile but thriving ecosystem, islanders here want to keep things just as they are, idyllic. So when a pair of New York real estate developers wanted to divide the island up and fill it with houses, lifelong resident Captain John Robinson Lewis was intent to stop the plan. He organized his neighbors to create the Block Island Conservancy and ultimately bought back the land the developers were planning to parcel out. The Conservancy has been active on the island ever since. No task is too large or too small. In the 90s, they literally moved this historic southeast lighthouse back 245 feet from the cliffs to keep the Coast Guard from demolishing it. And in 1984, they threatened to secede from the state if the use of mopeds wasn't restricted on the island. They got their way. Although it may be small in size, Rhode Island's historical significance in America is huge. From Roger Williams' ideas about freedom of religious thought, which are included in the Constitution, to the colonial era influences, the start of the Industrial Age and the Gilded Age, this tiny state packs a lot of history into its borders, combined with the breathtaking vistas and the independence still today of the people who live here. Rhode Island is a tiny, gleaming treasure on America's East Coast.